This is an Audio Wool original.
This episode of Frightday is brought to you by Spring-Heeled Jack Coffee. You need great coffee. Jack delivers. Visit springheeljack.coffee.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to support us, go to patreon.com/frightday.
So the kids going to their first church service this weekend for Sam's grandmother.
Is she Orthodox or something?
Catholic.
Oh.
So it's going to be a 2-hour service. I was talking to the girls.
Standing up, sitting down.
Talking to the girls, I was like, it's going to be very confusing. It's not going to make a lot of sense. Remember, we've talked about the Bible and how some people believe in the Bible, like Mom believes in Bigfoot, and it's okay that people believe that, but our family doesn't really believe that. And maybe someday you'll believe that, but we're not going to tell you to believe that because it doesn't make sense for you to believe that until you know what that even is. So for now, you're going to go to this and they're going to say a bunch of words. It's not going to make much sense, and just be polite and nod your head. And if you have questions, remember them. And after the service, you can ask me whatever questions you have.
Set it up.
And I said, you're also going to hear a lot of instances where people say God and Jesus Christ. And you need to understand that in this context, they're not swear words. And literally, creature covers her ears and starts going, my mom doesn't swear. No, Mom, don't say that.
Oh, no. Why'd you teach them that those were bad words?
Well, because we taught them that they were offensive words to some people.
Are they?
If you say Jesus Christ to some people, they get real fucking pissed. So anyhow,
Okay.
I was trying to explain. I was like, no, you can say that because they're not using it as like a term of frustration. They are talking about a human being that they believe existed. This is Jesus Christ, a person that people believe existed, who people think was the son of God. And Belle goes, who is the moon? I was like, no, son is like son and daughter.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
so like the child of the main God. So who's the main God? And I was like, well, everybody has a different idea about that. Mom believes that it's something that we'll never understand.
But it's a Bigfoot.
And she goes, so could the main God be science?
Oh, no. Sam.
Literally completely impromptu. I was like, oh my God. Meanwhile, Puckwudgie, listen to what she goes. If Jesus Christ was a real person, I'm going to summon him.
Cryptids and conspiracies.
Well, the apples don't fall far.
And I said,
Wow.
I said, summon him. Where did that come
What
from?
does that even mean?
Apparently they watched some cartoon where they summoned some spirit, and so she's decided she's going to summon Jesus Christ. So perhaps in the middle of the funeral, my youngest daughter might get up and start like chanting some incantation to summon this Jesus character they keep talking about.
That rules. I love that. Praise her, honestly.
Byron, last week I took a detour on my Whistleblowers of the Moon, and this detour now has us spilling over from Moon June into, oh my, it's still Moon July.
I'm speechless. I got nothing.
And in fact, we're giving your entire Nathan Bar-Jonah report the boot.
No, we're not.
And we're taking over with the moon for the rest of the
Absolutely not.
month. Bye-bye, Bar-Jonah. Bye-bye.
Is this a moontity?
It is.
I'm sorry. I am going to leave.
It was a moontiny.
So stupid. Right off the bat.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty good.
You do get 2 more weeks of Moon June.
I do. And this is great
It's
because...
supposed to be Bulai.
You're right, it was supposed to be Blue Eye.
Shucks.
Marian Rudnyk turns out to be one of the most amazing UFO interactees that we've come across. You know, Byron, in my life, I have been a person who is typically late to the party, shall we say. I am always jumping on bandwagons that have been traveling for quite a few miles.
Yeah, like your love of Sex in the City.
I was Sex in the City, Game of Thrones, my decision to start podcasting.
Well, you're welcome.
My conversion to skinny jeans, like everything, I'm well after the curve.
Yeah, but the flare's back, so...
I know. I just got to pull those out of the crawl space. So I am not a hip trendsetter, and I never have been, but I feel really special because I feel like I'm part of this club. Not that many people have interviewed or discussed Marian's story, and to me, it is one of the most compelling UFO stories out there, and it's recent. I had a wonderful discussion with him today. Very excited to have a full-blown interview. Really friendly and very, you know me and authenticity. Very authentic. It's interesting over the years that we've been doing this, just the difference between some people that I interview, the way they answer questions, and whether it's speech patterns or timing or even the words they choose I feel like I'm no George Knapp, but I've got a pretty good sense of people who are being transparent and genuine versus people who feel like they need to be guarded for some reason. And I felt really strongly that Marian's story is authentic, and I can't wait for him to share more of it with you. Now, here's the challenge. Marian has a full book out, which is very, very interesting. It does have quite a few typos in it. I feel like maybe I should offer to be his editor.
It's likely it was self-published, right?
I think so. I could edit it for him.
Well, I think you should offer that
I
service.
am one hell of an editor.
It wouldn't be self-published if it didn't have typos. It also wouldn't have typos if it wasn't self-published.
You know what's funny, though? When I worked at my other job and was helping get a book published, and there was lots of money and a publishing company behind it, there were still typos all over in it. So maybe that's something that just happens unless you've got a really good editor like me.
Okay.
Anyhow,
Well-
if you pick up a copy of the book, which I recommend you do,
Oh, there will be a link for it in the show notes of this episode of
yes.
Frightday.com.
And don't worry about the typos. I got the Kindle version so that I can make notes all over everything. I've got so many notes about so many questions to ask him. I even, Byron, and you know how much I love this, I even got to use the Pythagorean theorem at one point because he
love
was
a good
describing how he calculated distances
PT.
using trig. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this.
Seven.
I'm always telling my students how that's the one formula you will use. You will use it. You ever use it when you're like building things? A squared plus B squared equals C squared?
I'm a huge fan of winging it.
Oh, I'm more a fan of Pythagoras.
All right.
Anyhow, he's got this whole first book that's out. He's got a second book that's coming out that kind of tells the continued story. And there's material that's not in either book that I would like to discuss with him because there is so much wrapped up in his story. I think in the interest of trying to bring focus to my interview with him, because there will be so much I could cover, I am going to try and give a brief summary of his first book and his experiences contained therein today, and also talk about a couple things that I'm hoping to dive in deeper with him when we have our interview. Marian has an interesting background, which he'll share more with you during our interview, but he was raised in California. His parents both came from the Ukraine, which is very interesting. They both lived through World War II, had some really traumatic pasts, and were clearly some really resilient people. But his father was involved in the military, in the counterintelligence corps in World War II, and also did a number of interesting things with the Apollo program when he came to the States, worked with NASA. Very fascinating.
He wasn't like
guy.
a secret Nazi paperclip guy, right?
No, he was quite the opposite. He worked with the Americans. In fact, he escaped Auschwitz and stumbled into a...
What an offensive thing for me to joke
I know, you remind
about.
me of what's her name? Wendy? What's her name?
Wendy Williams.
Don't get yourself canceled.
I'm not gonna.
When he escaped Auschwitz, he stumbled into a Allied forces camp, ended up working, like I said, as a counterintelligence corps individual, and did a ton of work over there. And his mother had a really traumatic experience, and half of her family died in a bombing, and they ended up were in a displaced persons camp. And anyhow,
I just think that it's probably really complex, his relationship with his coworkers following World War II, working in the United States on the Apollo program.
Yes, I'm sure it was. And in fact, that's something that we could talk to him a little bit more about. But Marian discusses at one point in his book discussions he had with his father about some of his father's work, and psyops and counterintelligence stuff gave him some foundational skills that he's utilized throughout some of the experiences he's had after, his big sighting. The family background is important to me because, again, it lends itself to, this is a totally real human. This isn't some theoretical, detached concept or celebrity. This is a very real person with a very real backstory. Listening to him talk about his love for science and how he got involved in science to begin with. He was in a high school program where he got to do classes at Caltech with some of the professors. He took every weekend, evening course he could. Growing up in a family without a ton of money, college options were limited. And so Caltech was too expensive for him to attend. But he went...
You can go to class.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so few people do this. His passion and his intellectual curiosity...
Listen up, listeners. Just go to a class.
Just do it. Actually, Marian and I are going to talk about that a little bit because that is really important. And I think for people that are out there and curious and parents of kids who are interested in the sciences, it's important to know that the path Marian followed is a very real path. He went, basically beat the door down and learned everything he could, got an internship at JPL, got into JPL, worked his way up, worked with NASA, which is like incredible.
Isn't that what Lazar did too?
I think in some ways,
Yeah.
though Marian has protected his history in a little bit safer way. And so he has clear evidence of his degree from Cal Poly, and he has
Okay.
clear evidence of when he took these classes at Caltech and all of this. Marian demonstrated his intellect, but also his commitment to science. And this is something important for all of you naysayers out there, Sam and Byron.
What?
I'll be discussing with Marian, and this part hurts me a little bit, but some of the things that I have had fun with over the years and really love to speculate about, like my little bag here, Byron, my
What you got?
Stanley Kubrick moon
Oh,
landing
I
film
gave
crew
you
bag.
that.
It's
Yeah.
a great bag. I love
Yeah.
this bag.
You're welcome.
Marian says that the moon landing was real,
Well, we got to call this off.
and Marian says that there's nothing on the dark side of the moon.
Excuse me?
Marian also says that the face on Mars is just a shadow and there's really nothing to it.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I like this guy.
I know, right?
All right.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but my point is, this is not a wild hair. This is a man very committed to science, much in the
Wild
same way,
hair.
I would say, much in the same way that Meldrum was.
Okay.
Bringing forth somebody, and you know I like to do this, who has very unique things to say about this topic, but is coming from a position that is almost unimpeachable. His background is very strong, and I think you will agree when we speak with him that his presentation of information is transparent. He's not a polished salesman, he's a real human. Okay?
Yeah.
Marian had some very interesting experiences while working at JPL. So last week we talked a little bit about his experience finding missing Gemini footage
Under a
that-
floorboard?
under floorboards in his building at JPL of the imaging laboratory that he managed, that he ran, what happened, and the very strange person without any identification that came and picked them up. And that was kind of the first run-in he had with the shady side of what could be influencing these things. But even then, he didn't overthink it. He continued working with JPL. He continued working with NASA. He got to a point where he was ready to do something else with his life. And he actually, there were a few other people during this time that did this, but moved from the field of astronomy and astrophysics into the film industry as a animator and special effects advisor because he has all this imaging background, right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
he moved
yeah.
in and he actually worked on some really cool films. He worked on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, he's super busy
to
removing things from the
Mars
backgrounds of all the
of-
films.
Exactly.
Is that what he's doing?
Right. Well,
all right.
it's funny. Well, you
lot
can
of
ask him about
practice.
that, but it's pretty hilarious. He had a really cool experience doing that. He has worked as an animator. He worked with Cartoon Network.
Are we talking Two Stupid Dogs? Are we talking Ed and Eddie? What do we
I
got?
don't know. Should we check out his IMDb?
Oh, why not pull that up? Whoa, he got a credit in Mystery Men?
Mystery Men, Titanic, Home Alone 3,
End of
Star
Days?
Trek,
Mission to Mars is-
Unbreakable, Vanilla Sky, Lord of the Rings,
This doesn't
Beautiful
help
Mind.
me with any of the... He was a science consultant for Armageddon.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So he actually ended up working in like Disney animation studios. So this is a man who is a hard enough worker and good enough at learning things.
Oh, he removed all the strings from the back of Jesus Christ while he was on the cross in the Passion of the Christ.
I think you should have left him looking like a marionette myself.
No,
But
hey, that's marionette.
marionette.
Nice.
Before we go full into his Hollywood transition, I do want to mention something cool because it was in his book and he didn't bring it up in any of the talks I've seen him give. But you know the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Never seen it.
Fucking Christ.
I mean, how many times?
If Sam's
this is like
cousin is
3
listening
this
to
year. This is
he's
great.
no longer going to listen.
Oh, please keep listening.
I mean, that's gross. That's like one of the greatest movies of all time. Okay, so here's the thing. End of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Spoiler alert, Byron. They get the Ark. It's the Ark of the Covenant. You know, like the...
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay, so they capture it, but it gets into a box and it shows this giant warehouse, like this anonymous giant government warehouse, and this guy's like wheeling it down this giant aisle and he stacks it up and you can just see there's just stuff everywhere and you imagine like it's filled with all of the other secrets that the government doesn't want us to know. So apparently there's a storage facility near downtown LA that's referred to as Chelly. He actually got to visit it and that's basically what it is.
Wow.
But it made him really sad because there's so much... He wasn't asserting that it was all like
Hidden
conspiracy,
knowledge, yeah.
secret stuff. It was more like the government takes shitty care of things and this stuff's stacked up everywhere and there's so much knowledge in there that we really need. But everything's in terrible shape and we aren't putting any money into like cataloging or documenting them.
If we're not publicly displaying it, why does it have to be in?
Remember when we talked about the moon landing, and one of the reasons people go so bananas about it is that the original footage has been lost.
Yeah.
Some people say that's a conspiracy, like, and it was on purpose. I don't know, but if we asked Marian, I think he would say, oh no, it's just because of negligence. Like, they aren't keeping track of this stuff. A lot of it is completely disregarded, forgotten about, and not treated as you would imagine super amazing historical pieces to be treated. It upset him.
I could see that.
And because he's a scientist, I think it upset him more than it would upset the average person. And knowing that a lot of this material was even set to be destroyed because they run out of space.
Wait a second. They call like the shred truck to get rid of
Yes.
pieces of...
And in fact, when he was there, he rescued full-sized prints from the lunar orbiter missions that were just going to get like thrown away. It's like you work at an office building and you go into like the attic where they've got like the shitty staplers stored and like the old desk
Sure.
supplies. And you're like, oh, I can use this.
Or
Except he found like these original photos.
Or you work in a movie theater and they have a stand-up cardboard cutout of Shaquille O'Neal.
Or Agent Cooper.
Okay, like the... Yeah, do you still have that?
Yes, I do.
All right, well.
Till the day I die.
In Shazam.
Shazam! He had to fight to get that lunar orbiter data restored, and basically everybody was annoyed with him, but then he hosted his lab, hosted a big public open house where people could come and see it, and everybody loved it, and it was amazing.
That's nice.
Yes, he got to the point where he was dealing with a lot of people pissed off at him because they thought he was covering up the UFO stuff, and there are aliens on the moon, and you're hiding it from us.
Well,
and
technically he was. Just not on purpose.
well,
It was his job to not let the loonies in. We talked about that last week.
right. It wasn't his job to not let the loonies in, but when the loonies got in, it became his job to do like the PR stuff of dealing with them and like, okay, yeah, you can look at this. It's the end of the day. Now it's time to go. And he had to deal with Stanton Friedman in that capacity, et cetera, et cetera.
He was psychically changing things too. Manipulating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that is very, very, very
That's
true.
exhausting. I don't know if you've ever tried that.
What do you mean?
Psychically manipulating matter.
Oh, no, it takes very little energy for me to do that.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. But the planetary image facility that he ran, he took it very seriously. And so when these people came to see the pictures on the dark side of the moon and they wanted to see the structures, and he explained to them what they were looking at, like he said, okay, I'll show you. Yeah. Like, let me show you why that's not the case. I think we talked about this last week. He showed them the flaws in the footage from the developing issues.
Yeah.
And people lost their mind and were super bummed out. Damn it. This is horrible. There were supposed to be cities on the moon, and now Marian's ruined it for everybody. But again, this is because the man is very committed to science, even more so than crazy moon theories. So at this juncture with NASA, it was kind of a difficult time. NASA had a lot of fighting about whether they were going to do more manned missions or more unmanned missions. He felt like if all we were going to do was investigate things that were in Earth's orbit, we were missing what the mission of NASA was supposed to be. He was really wanting go back to the moon, keep going, go to Mars. Those are the
with
things.
men on board.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he thought the space shuttle program was great and a lot of cool stuff came out of it. But he felt like the abandonment of further exploration into the solar system and beyond was really a misstep. And very little was happening in either direction because there was so much fighting between the two groups.
I don't know. Where would you stand? You want to put people out there? It's
I
kind of
think-
dangerous.
no,
and
I think
what
you
they can
do-
do is kind of limited.
You do unmanned first to
Yeah.
make sure you can do manned. I mean, exactly like we did with the Apollo program. That's
true.
You know, like you certainly don't just start firing people up. I mean, it's not Russia. We don't do that, right? Like,
Did they do that with people? Oh, I guess we
remember
talked about
the burning
that.
ones that
Yeah,
we heard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the screaming.
The screaming.
It never
yeah.
leaves my head.
I know, it's very bad. I agree. Yeah, we need to be sending manned missions out there. Like, who at one point in their childhood didn't want to be a damn astronaut?
Seems scary, actually.
I wanted to be it until I read part of Stephen Hawking, Brief History of Time, and had a discussion with my dad about the notion of infinity in space. And then I had nightmares about it constantly and never wanted to be an
Kind of
astronaut again.
claustrophobic, even though it's the opposite.
It's
of that.
agoraphobic.
Yeah.
It's very terrifying. I do not like it at all. He also was feeling like he wasn't able to do as much within the job as he wanted. He was pretty artistic. In fact, his brother was a violinist, like is a violinist,
Oh.
a really phenomenally accomplished one. And he had some artistic inclinations himself and felt like he wasn't able to make the progress he wanted to within this scientific community, and there were people he knew that were migrating to Hollywood to do those types of things. So he said, all right, let's see. It's time to make a change. Late 90s, I think 96, 97, he went to LA and started taking classes through the Animation Union. Again, very similar format to how he got into JPL. He just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, was able to get classes and then internships, and then was able to take advantage when an opportunity opened up.
The first opportunity was a little film by a director, James Cameron.
Well, that was the first film that he did, yes, but he actually got involved in some ad campaigns first for
Makes
Levi's
sense.
Jeans, I think was his first
Oh,
one.
wow. Rotoscoping what out? Wrinkles?
Well, it was like a cartoon
Oh, okay.
jeans ad.
Makes sense.
You know, like late 90s. You remember those jeans that were super popular in the late 90s? Like big, wide.
Is Big White a brand?
Oh, no, look, like that. That was,
Oh, so some wide leg, I
Yes.
think is what they call it.
no, those are big wides.
I don't think that's what they call them.
Big wides.
All right.
Okay. He was very excited. He continued working in this and found it very satisfying. Again, the fact that he discusses all of this in his book, I find interesting because it just adds more to like, hey, this is a guy who did stuff and was really excited about it. He wasn't just this guy who saw a UFO.
It's kind of interesting to be honest about your involvement in things that might add some doubt to your story.
Well-
because you're working in entertainment, which is like a
Right.
fiction industry, you know?
Right, exactly. Well, and I think that background certainly gave him an additional layer of perspective.
Other than the Passion of the Christ, of course.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Oh my God. But you talked about him being on Armageddon, and he actually got really frustrated with them.
Well, because he was a science consultant. This wasn't a digital artist job.
Yes, but what he was supposed to do was advise people to address the look and feel of all the meteors that bombarded the Earth and make them look realistic, especially at the beginning of the movie. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And it took tons of convincing, but he finally got the 3D CGI team to, instead of doing like vertical asteroid strikes, which was what Michael Bay wanted.
They would come in sideways.
Correct. He was able to show that about 20% of them in a shallow or near horizontal angles of less than 25 degrees. And it makes much more exciting scenes. Meteors could literally be shown punching through multiple buildings before hitting the ground, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. So that's actually more scientifically accurate thanks to Marian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marian.
So now we need to go rewatch Armageddon. But yes, Beautiful Mind, Titanic, Lord of the Rings, all sorts of stuff. And then he got to work on a Star Trek movie, he was a big Trekkie, so that was very exciting for him. Eventually landed at the dream location, Disney Studios.
I don't know if it was the dream back then, but maybe. There were some dark days at Disney.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people always wanted to work at Disney if you were really into this type of stuff.
That's probably true.
But he thought it was really funny when he ended up working on Mission to Mars that focused on the face to Mars, which he had spent time trying to debunk while at NASA. People that were Richard Hoagland's followers, trying to let them know that that actually wasn't a thing. And then he was making a movie about it, which was pretty funny. He got to work on some very cool original Walt Disney pieces. What do they call that?
Colorize?
No, they were colorized already.
He was
but
in charge of making all the Mickey Mouse ones less racist?
No, I don't think that's what he...
Oh, okay.
No, oh my God. He talks about, like, in Lady and the Tramp, there had been some historically oriented defects.
Like the science of gravity between two dogs and a thread of
And when
pasta.
they added new film, then it changed the original footage, and so he was trying to make everything work together and look cohesive. He worked on 102 Dalmatians, and then he ended up with a portfolio that had some fairly famous things in it through working with Disney, which landed him a fairly reputable job working with the U.S. Air Force.
So he went back.
Well, kind of. He doesn't get into the details. We'll ask him about it. He said, kind of like I hear Lou Elizondo talk about, he's not going to reveal information that actually he thinks is dangerous to reveal or falls within his NDA. There's a lot that Marian says, I feel like this could put people in danger, so I'm not going to reveal it. So he doesn't say what production it was or what specific people were involved. But he was working on a set of scenes, and he was handed some footage to digitally edit and clean up. It was from the U.S. Air Force, and it showed a historic jet test flight. That's all he'll say. And it was a successful one, okay? So something that happened before early 2000s.
Is this when we're breaking Mach 5?
Here's a quote from his book.
Okay.
My problem with it? A UFO was plainly evident in the shot. The footage was black and white, and the object in question was a bright white orb that appeared in the distance, rapidly approached the aircraft, paced it, and then took off in a burst of speed. Okay, so first thing to acknowledge. He was one of the people that dispelled artifacts on footage as not UFO in origin, okay? Mm-hmm. So he has tons of imaging expertise. When he sees something like this and he says it was unidentified, I think we can actually believe him and not question him about the simple explanations. The powerful imaging software at my disposal allowed me to view the shot again and again in various ways, and the result was always the same. The UFO was actually there and very real. Unfortunately, the UFO being real complicated my job tremendously. What was I to do? Clean up the shot and leave the UFO there? Were the visual effects supervisor, producer, and directors aware of what was in the scene? I tabled the shot and shot out a series of emails, made some calls and left some messages, and then went on working on other shots while I waited for an answer. What did I ask? Simply put, I asked everyone if they were aware that there was a UFO in the film footage, and was that intentional? If not, was I supposed to still leave it in? Or was I supposed to do something about it? So, what do you think the upshot was?
I think they told him to keep it quiet. Remove the UFO.
I was told to paint out the UFO as if it was never there in the first place. Word was from my friends that some sort of Air Force official who personally brought the footage was very upset with the whole affair, but pleased that I had agreed to paint the UFO out without question. While I worked to comply, word spread among our team that I had UFO footage, and people dropped by to take a peek before it was gone. Everyone seemed keenly aware that their jobs could be threatened, so they quietly satisfied their curiosity and then went back to their respective jobs. So, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, again, so he's got the experience encountering this Gemini footage that was significant. What was missing was significant. Mm-hmm. Then he's working in the film industry, working on some movie that happens to include a piece of actual Air Force footage. Wish we knew what movie it was. I feel like that's the type of thing you could figure out.
Well, I was trying to figure out what year it was and which Air Force test was important. Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point we would be in the
mid 2000s,
early 2000s.
Okay.
Of course, I guess I don't know how long it takes.
Because I was trying to look through.
I mean, it could have been older footage too, right? Because it was black and white footage. The movie, we just need to find a movie that was released then that contained footage of an actual Air Force flight test.
And that's the other thing is most movies that involve images of the Navy or the Army have to be approved by the Navy or the Army.
Which clearly they were, if like this high up guy was the one that brought it there.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sadly, right around this time, Marian's father was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, dang.
He was working about 100 hours a week and loving it, but there was no way for him to help and take care.
100 hours a week?
I know. But there was no way for him to help and take care of his father and continue doing this. He moved on to writing, and this is where Santa's sister comes in, Byronius.
I knew we'd get there someday.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas miracle.
Yeah, and so he wrote quite a few things and had a lot of fun doing that, cared for his father. His father lived, I think, longer than anticipated, ended up staying in Monrovia and writing from there and taking care of his mother after his father passed. His mother also was diagnosed with some serious health issues right after.
Man.
And so he's been a caregiver, which another thing, I mean, I'm sure we all have family members who have been caregivers. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's one of the hardest things you can do as a human being. And so anybody who is a caregiver to an elderly person
you have to have a lot of mental and emotional strength.
Yes. Exactly. So here we are, fast forward some years. He's living in Monrovia with his mother. It's New Year's Day, 2017. Sitting and having a good, fun first lunch of the year with his madre at a McDiner. Looks out the window, sees these strange craft drop from the sky. After witnessing this and going through the things we discussed last week, where he ended up on a video call with somebody in Space Force who was demanding that he turn over this material, tons of F-18s come there. And again, to be clear, Marian is not saying that they were there to attack him or to scare him.
They were looking for the wreckage of what he saw.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things Marian said to me on the phone today was, I don't think I'm like super special or anything. I think that I was the wrong person to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Like Gene at the golf course.
Who's Gene at the golf course?
Gene Schiller, the golf pro, got his head shot.
That just got his head shot off. Yeah, that poor fella.
Yeah.
So what happened was you don't have a lot of clear footage of UFOs, A. B, you don't have a lot of people with significant scientific background coming out and talking about their UFO sightings. And then C, we've got a situation where clearly something happened with that craft. And when it was shown to government officials, it meant more to them than it did to Marian. They knew something was going on. And so it appeared to them that that craft must have crashed, and they sent people out to start looking. In the last few years, Marian has seen the most insane array of aircraft in and around his hometown. And just to be clear, he is not near a military base.
Like we talked about last week,
Right.
the airstrip is not big enough to really...
No, it is a completely weird place for there to be this range. And unless you understand military, which I certainly don't very well, the range of vehicles won't be as meaningful to you. But I'm really hoping I can talk Sam into doing a quick little weapons authenticity to talk about the rarity of some of these things that not only he says he's seen, but that he has pictures of, and the dates that they were seen, and information to verify that they were there. It is not a coincidence that all of this, something strange is going on around there. The other thing that he has photos of, and I found this to be fascinating, the gym that he works out at, it apparently moved recently, but up until recently, the front windows look straight out at the mountain range that we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And he would be working out and would watch giant, like semi-sized dump trucks of dirt drive out of the mountains, come into town, escorted by police vehicles. And there would be huge explosions of dynamite in the mountains. There would be the smell of burning rock, like things were being carved out. He says, I am certain that there is a base back there, but it's blocked off. You can't get in. You can't even park in the neighboring areas without a permit from one of the residents in the area. Like, it won't even let you park there. So I told him that I feel like I want to go down to Monrovia and camp out and sneak into the canyon at night, but I'd probably end up dead.
I doubt that you would find anything.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like what's back there is pretty... Whatever's happening is intense, and it has been going on now for a few years. So when we have our discussion with Marian, I'm hoping to learn quite a bit more about kind of the phases that he's been through since this all started and since he wrote his book even, because the book came out in 2019, and based on my conversation with him today, that certainly was not the end of the story. A lot has happened to him since then. I also want to get his input on what exactly he thinks is going on in those mountains, on how that may or may not tie to what he has seen and what he has seen coming out with kind of this slow rolling disclosure evolution. There are so many things. I hope that we have enough time to cover even half of them, and that maybe we'll get a second interview with him, because this is a absolute wealth of information. Wow. And I am so excited to have discovered such an awesome resource. This man knows a lot, and I think you're all going to really enjoy hearing from him.
Got airplane coming over.
It's that black helicopter.
Just so you know, the Airdrome restaurant, built by Richard and Maurice McDonald, was next to the Monrovia Airport on Route 66. It was the first McDonald's.
The one that's in Monrovia?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first one that was built next to the airport was originally called the Airdrome Restaurant, and it was renamed McDonald's. It was a small wooden octagonal building that was eventually moved to San Bernardino in 1940.
That's amazing.
So
this certainly, I don't think, is what Marian had in mind for his life plan, but that's another thing, and I think I'll save this for the interview. I talked to him today. One of the questions I asked him when we were on the phone together was, why haven't you thrown in the towel and just said, okay, I'm moving, I'm going underground, I'm not dealing with the fallout of this anymore? Why keep going? Clearly this is adding more difficulty to your life than it is value.
Because it's certainly not profitable.
He had a very interesting answer to that question. Yeah, and honestly, I think that's a good thing to bring up. So yes, he is selling a book, but you have to keep in mind that he's an author. That is his livelihood. Mm-hmm. He didn't have this experience and then decide to sell books about it. Like, he had been selling books for years, which was why when the powers that be disabled his Amazon book account as an author and seller, it was hugely impactful to him because the writing of a book did not come as a response to seeing a UFO. That was his career at the time.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's going to sell a book. And honestly, $10 for an ebook of this interesting story and all the photos that come with it is
Worth it.
It's worth it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Link in the bio.
But I know that there's a lot of skepticism. Although, here's the thing. So people are skeptical anytime somebody's making money off of something like this.
Patreon.com/Frightday.
He didn't mention one time today in our discussion about selling the book. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was really interesting.
That's nice. 'Cause
Also,
that is a priority to some people.
well, and I'm sure it is a priority to him because it is his livelihood.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
But like that in our discussion, that wasn't what he talked about. And on the other side, you look at somebody like Lazar, who has accepted no money and been very vocal about accepting no money, and people still naysay the shit out of him. So what difference does it make?
Well, some people sell books. Other people sell ingredients to make explosives.
Yeah, but that's what he was doing before, too.
I still think he is doing it.
Well,
Did you
probably.
see him and Corbell on the
With
4th of July?
The drone battle?
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that it was a thing. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah,
Was
I
it pretty
didn't really-
amazing?
it was fine. I didn't like that they were reusing footage from attacking the Viet Cong and slicing it in with the shooting of their bottle rockets off a drone. I was like, I don't know,
Unless
guys.
they were making like an anti-American political statement.
Corbell's an artist, so
Maybe is Corbell going anti-America?
unsure.
He's gonna have to reckon with Rogan about that one.
All right. Well.
Fucking Rogan.
So this was just a zoom in on the life of Marian before we interview him next week.
Yeah, and I think understanding that there are some, basically the way I look at it is Marian had a life that was filled with shiny opportunities to become a UFO nut, and he turned them down at every juncture.
Yeah, just like he turned down credit for a couple films here, he is uncredited for Passion of the Christ, good. The Matrix Revolutions, uncredited, as well as Scary Movie 3.
And I don't know if it's his choice to be uncredited. I think that, depending on what your level is...
I like to think it was his choice.
Okay, I don't know that it is.
I know
but
it's
that's...
not, but...
Okay, but yes, those are good ones to be uncredited for. I agree.
Wow.
I agree.
Scary Movie 3. It's a hoot.
It was hooty.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for that report.
Oh, you're so welcome. I cannot wait for you to be in on this chit-chat with Marian.
Moon Bulai.
He's seen some very interesting UFOs since his book came out, namely pyramidal-shaped ones. We're going to hear from Marian about why all this new footage that keeps being released by official sources and Corbell and Lou Elizondo is all nighttime footage. Where are the daytime footage pieces? And why that might be. We're also going to hear a lot more about MIBs.
Mibs?
Yeah, MIBs, Men in Black.
Ah.
Yeah.
I think if you go back, I bet I say that a lot.
I bet you do too. Yeah, Marian's got a whole lot of history with
It's
those.
not a common acronym for me, but...
I like it. It's a good one.
Kelly, until then, where are you going to be?
I'm going to be on Twitter at Kelly Frightday. I'm going to be on email, kelly@frightday.com.
Hopping on email.
And I'm going to be having really fun discussions and reading more books.
Maybe hop in that Discord server, discord.frightday.com. People are asking for you.
Really?
People are dropping cues that are just waiting to be aired.
Like Q is in QAnon or
No,
just
like
questions?
questions.
Okay, good.
And
And I
I'm
want
at-
nothing to do with that one.
And I'm at Byron McKoy on Twitter and Instagram. Byron@frightday.com is my email address. But until next Frightday, I'm Byron.
I'm a Kelly.
Take your mom to McDonald's.
Yeah.
And stay
Take Nancy.
Don't come on. And stay scared.
Nancy to McDee's.
We're going to save all the times you mess up for the end.
Please do.
You're really
Mayor,
funny.
Mayor,
be
Marian.
great.
Marian.
You could call him M-Dog.
You're a bad Marian.
Marian. Mar.
Like
Mars. I need to listen again because I had it down and now I don't. If it's Marian Rudnyk or Marian.
You've been saying Marian.
I've been doing both. I think I've been
You sure?
toggling. And I'm fairly sure I even toggled in my conversation with him today. Marian's story Marian had some.
Marian.
Oh my God, Marian.
You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy, theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.